It's finally happened after week where we had good weather all week. And then Thursday, the day we record these things, the weather gets crappy. I started to think that Cheryl Scott just hated me or something. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Finally, a warm Thursday. So we're going to have a smoke filled room. And I'm pretty dang excited about it. It's going to be real hard to turn my smile into a frown. But doing their best this week to make me unhappy is our three guests. I kid, I joke. I'm really pumped with the three guests we have this week. Let me introduce them. We've got Andrew Chesney. He's a state senator for the 45th District in Illinois. Previously was a state rep and also an alderperson in the city of Freeport. Andrew, we're glad to have you.
Good to be on. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. We also have Jim Zay, DuPage County board member. Previously was a Wayne Township trustee. Also served as the DuPage County Republican chairman. A thankless job if there ever was a thankless job. Jim, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Glad to have you. And we're a little bit happy to have Collin Moseley. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's sleepy. I don't know. He's got like that Chris thing where sometimes it's a crapshoot. Either he's awesome or we kind of wish we hadn't called on him. But we'll see how Collin Moseley does this week. He's the director of the Illinois Freedom Caucus. What's going on, bud?
Hey, well, good to be here. I think I'm most honored to be here with Senator Chesney, of course, the only Freedom Caucus senator in the state of Illinois. So pretty cool to be here with him.
I'll try not to take that personally. I mean, we
Yeah,
both have really
I
cool
don't feel
first.
I don't feel slighted at all.
Looks like we'll have some juicy debates this week. I'm looking forward to it. And doing their best to try to turn my smile into a frown. Our core's political experts. We have doom grifter Michael Butler. We have what's a purveyor of what's another term? I'm blanking right now.
Oh,
Purveyor of misery or spelunker of misery, Chris Jacoviak.
yeah, Spelunker of Misery. That's the one I prefer, Colin.
There you go. Spelunker of misery, Chris Jacoviak. Doom grifter Michael Butler. What's going on, guys?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm always good, man. You know that.
That's good.
Chris, you gonna wake up for this episode?
Another week, another nightmare, Colin.
Well, that's what I say every time I have to introduce you. All right, here we go. Let's go into we start as sometimes if you guys have watched our podcast, I don't love talking national politics, but sometimes we have to. And this is a topic we do need to cover because it impacts elections in Illinois. We've seen a few polls come out recently that have showed that voters are starting to sour on Trump's handling of the economy. So we got to talk about this nationwide topic. He still gets high marks on immigration. He gets high marks on a number of topics. To be honest, it's actually overall he's doing decently well with approval ratings, but on the economy, those numbers are starting to shift, which is significant because it's a major reason he won in the first place. And even when polls were showing negative numbers for him during his first term, they always gave him high marks. The public always gave him high marks for his handling of the economy. So when you see one poll show him with a 44% approval, 56% disapproval when it comes to the economy, and then another poll backs that up, and that one had it just around the same numbers. Now, of course, I'm struggling to find the exact number here. Let me see here. Here we go. Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. Here we go. 49. Here, his job approval is 47, 45, so that's gone down a little bit. His economy number, I'm going to find that, and I'll drop it in a little bit later here, but I don't want to keep mumbling and stumbling. The point is that with the tariffs going back and forth, with people feeling the economic pinch, this week as we're recording this, you've got turmoil in the stock market. There's just a lot of things that have made people a little bit nervous, and trust in Trump's handling of the economy is dropping as a result. So I'll stop there. Just curious what you guys think as to what's happening here and what's leading to this and what we need to do to turn that around.
Well, I think it's ironic, whenever Kamala or Biden was on the ballot, when Kamala was on the ballot leading up to that November election, they were really gaslighting people, and the media, played right into their hand where they were saying, oh, the economy is actually doing great and it's wonderful, and Biden and Kamala are doing an outstanding job. Then as soon as Trump takes office, they're like, oh, the economy went to crap. Like,
Right.
and there's inflation all of a sudden. We never noticed this before. So I think I think that's definitely a factor in this. I would also say we did actually get some numbers towards the beginning of this week on, the price of eggs, gas prices, some other metrics where it showed that things were moving in a positive direction. I mean, it wasn't a massive shift, but it was positive movement. So I think Trump's got to continue to get his message out there. I mean, obviously the
But
tariffs
Michael,
are an
but isn't
issue.
that the thing here? Like the thing I think is that what's the message? I mean, you've got the media, Democrats are constantly railing on Republicans, and you're right, it's hypocrisy. They're saying, oh, the economy was great until the moment Trump took office. That's BS. But there's no message on the Republican side here. I don't know what the heck to say about tariffs. One morning Trump wakes up, he wants tariffs. The next morning he wakes up, he doesn't want tariffs. Like we as Republicans are on the front lines of this, and what do we say? There's no message here. There's nothing we're equipped with to be able to deal with this, and I think that's what's causing this angst. Voters want to trust Trump on the economy, but what's our message?
Yeah,
the message.
I really like. Oh, go ahead, Senator.
The message is pretty simple. The Biden economy is awful, and we're still seeing the Biden economy. It's going to take some time to turn it into the Trump economy, and it's going to be bumpy. You had a 50% rise in the stock market over 2 years under Biden, and you still had overwhelming majorities throughout the country that said the economy was terrible. And President Trump correctly said there's going to be a hard reset. You're seeing the hard reset. And so it's certainly going to disrupt the status quo when you're firing tens of thousands of federal employees. But what the Democrats aren't talking about is the border. What they haven't talked about is that eggs have gone down, mortgage rates have gone down, gas has gone down a little bit. And you haven't even seen the true impact of all the regulatory reforms that he's done by executive order that are going to probably be seen by the last quarter of this year, first quarter of next year. So it's just going to be a little bit bumpy, but just because if people felt January 19th that the economy was tanking, they're not going to feel by March 13th that the economy is great. It's going to take time for people to reset how they view the economy. And I think that's what you're seeing in the suggested polling.
And Senator, you're not wrong. However, Trump did kind of create this problem himself. I mean, over and over, he said, the moment I'm president, everything's going to get better. I mean, he sort of set this trap for himself a little bit. If what he needs is time, which is perfectly reasonable, the economy takes a bit of time to move. If what he needs was time, then that's the message he needs to be putting out, because we need that. Again, on the front lines, if Republican numbers are going down on the economy, that's hurting us all the way down the ballot in the lead into major elections in a few weeks, not just in Illinois. Wisconsin's got their Supreme Court race. Like, right now, we need to have a stronger message on this. And if time's what he needs, then that's what they need to be saying.
Oh, Collin, I love you, but got to remember, Donald Trump won every 7 swing states, and it was this group and many groups that said that Trump was going to be a drag all over this country, and turned out not to be true. Donald Trump is a true winner, and he won every purple state on America First. And I'm telling you, he's a winner. Give it a little bit of time. Let's not throw it out after 50 days. That's all I'm saying.
No one was saying to throw it out. And I'll just make it clear. On this podcast, actually, many of us said he would win. So I'm going to correct you on that. But, Jim, go ahead.
I'll bring another perspective. Outside of the politics, we're a manufacturer. I'm a metal stamper. So I buy aluminum, I buy steel, I buy all that. And as soon as the talks about tariffs came out, prices went up immediately, even though the tariffs haven't even started. And I can tell you, orders came just to a halt across the board. I think everybody's not leery of what's going on. And I agree that the president's got to fix this, but he's got to come out with a clear message. We can't be, like you said, tariffs one day, not tariffs one day. We get mad at Canada. Hey, now we're going to tax aluminum at 250%. Or now we're going to tax, lumber. He's just got to stick to his guns and come out with a clear message and say, this is what we're going to do. I think we understand what he wants to do, and he wants it to say the United States has been paying way too much, been getting screwed for years. But he has to come out with a clear message to get everybody down. And the economy, people look at their 401ks. I mean, the market was down another 500 points today. I mean, that scares the seniors. That scares a lot of other people. So, again, I think he just comes out with a consistent message. It doesn't change every day. I think we'll get through this. But, again, it's going to take a while, like you said, to fix the economy. But it's got to be a consistent message coming from the president.
And to back you up on tariffs, and then Collin, I'll pass it to you. I want to share some of the poll numbers on tariffs specifically. I'm not saying that the policies of tariffs are good or bad. We've had people on this podcast who've talked about tariffs and praised them. So this isn't me taking a position. I'm just telling you what the American public is saying right now. 60% disapprove of the tariffs, only 40% approve in one of these polls. And another one, 53% think that the U.S. increasing the tariffs will hurt the economy. Only 37% say they will help the economy. And let's just talk Illinois. The TMA, Technology Manufacturing Association out of Illinois, they surveyed their members on tariffs, and it came back basically a 50-50 split. That 49% supported tariffs, 40% opposed tariffs. So tariffs are a hot button issue that people are struggling with. We had some really eloquent people come on this podcast and explain tariffs, and I was like, man, if we saw this coming out of the Trump White House, we'd be seeing different poll numbers right now. How can we do it on this rinky-dink little podcast, and yet we're not seeing those messages come out of the White House? That's what I'm asking for here, is give us some backup, because while the president doesn't have to face voters anymore, all the rest of us Republicans do, and so we need some of that backup so that we don't have to face the backlash while the president has the time he needs, supposedly, to turn the economy around. Go ahead, Collin.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that, I think that this is a means to an end. America elected a president that they very clearly trust to run the country based on the MAGA mandate. Our president made it clear on Maria Bartiromo, on Mornings with Maria, I think it was Sunday. He said, look, I know things are shaky right now, but I am trying to build back wealth into America again. And so, things are going to be a little difficult right now, but he's asking, the president is asking for our trust, right? He is asking for us to trust him to do the job that he was very clearly elected to do on the economy. Look, we knew that these tariffs were going to be a part of the conversation. We knew that the media and the Democrat and the deep state Republicans it's all stacked against him, like it always has been. They're out there screaming their heads off over this stuff because, like always, they hate Donald Trump. But the reality is Trump's trying to bring wealth back to America again. So I think, could that message be stronger, more organized? Maybe. Yeah, sure. But I know this weekend when I heard him say that on Fox News, I'm like, okay, well, here it is. This is going to be shaky for a little bit, but long term, this is the long game. America will be wealthy again.
We just need to take it past Fox News then, because I'm telling you, this isn't me saying this. This is two different polls. I found the other poll where it has the approval numbers on his handling of the economy. 48% disapproved in that poll, 37% approved. Yeah. And then in the third poll here I'm looking at, 46% said his policies are making the economy worse. 28% said they're making the economy better. So this message needs to get beyond us six.
And I agree with you. I agree with
News. Like if Trump needs time, then somehow we need to actually get that message out, because right now it's not getting out, and it's as a result that's where you see his approval numbers going down, Republican approval numbers going down. Like, we're put in charge because of the economy. We can't lose that ground.
I think it's March, right after a general election, and I think that we have plenty of time where the Republican Party could figure out the messaging strategy, and the economy can make a rebound here. Okay, the economy, the market's not doing so well right now. Market really hasn't been doing well in a long time. Everybody, I mean, the whole S&P 500, you all noticed, was a facade. So it was inevitable that the economy was going to take some type of hit once there was some type of fluctuation with tariffs or Trump's rhetoric or any of these sorts of things. This was going to happen. I think the problem will manifest itself if we're talking. It's the middle of August, we call it July, actually. Middle of July, economy's not really seeing any rebounds. Republicans still can't get their messaging straight on the economy issue. If that's the case, then I would be more worried about this if I was the Republican Party. But right now, fluctuations in the market. If it continues. If the messaging doesn't fix itself, greater problem. But I think you're right. I think the messaging that you gave is that give us time. I think if win back any points for the Republicans right now, maybe one or two, but it'll at least be out there that, because it's true. This needs time to fix itself.
Chris, your audio is cutting in and out. We got most of your points, and they were good points. I just want to let you know that just for those who are watching, your audio is kind of cutting in and out. So maybe check into that. But
can I add one more thing, Collin?
Yeah.
I think history shows us, if you look back to Barack Obama's first term significantly and a second term as well, the S&P for weeks, months, and overall in the year after Obama was elected in 2008 and in 2012 was down. I mean, it is not uncommon for us to see fluctuations and choppiness in a market immediately following major political elections. So again, I know I'm not disagreeing with you. The message needs to be carried better, but I think as far as the actual implications, this is not totally out of the norm.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it. I want to give some good news because remember, 2025 is my year to try to be more positive. So let me give some good news that I found in one of these polls, which is when you look at the favorability of the two political parties, neither one is favorable. Both of us are underwater. However, Democrats are way more unfavorable than Republicans are. They saw the favorability of Republicans was 39%, but only 29% for Democrats. So coming out of the election, we've been talking about how the winds are at our backs as Republicans. This is the first time we've seen some signs of that wavering, which is why I'm a little bit nervous about it. And I want us to keep going and keep doing better. But overall, the winds still are at our back. There are still some great signs for Republicans. We just can't squander this.
Well,
Let's
I
move.
think
Go ahead, Michael. Close us out.
Well, I was just going to say on that point, we probably do have a messaging issue on some of the economic stuff, like has been talked about here. But Democrats have a messaging issue across the board on a lot of issues, and I think that is part of the reason why their approval rating is 10 points lower than ours.
Yeah, ours is crappy, but yours is crappier. Welcome to politics in this century. All right, let's go to our next political topic here. Shifting back to Illinois, as we record this, we are 2.5 weeks away from local elections in Illinois. These are incredibly important. As we asked each of our guests what they wanted to talk about this week, every single one brought up these elections for good reason. So let's jump into it. I've got a few topics I specifically want to cover here, but before I do so, I just want to pass it to each of our three guests. Are there any races that you've been keeping an eye on that you find are particularly important that you'd like our audience to be paying attention to? Go for it.
Well, one of the ones that's kind of interesting in my region is Belleville mayor's race because the incumbent is has a Democrat voting record. She's aligned with the county board chairman, and then her opponent is aligned with Jay Hoffman, the Democrat state rep. So there's a lot of infighting on the Democrat side in a city that votes 60-40 Democrat. So I've been keeping an eye on that. It's going to be interesting to see how that one
Isn't that
plays
the one where
out.
the mayor's calling the police on their opponent?
No, I don't know. That didn't happen in this
Is a
one.
different one? All right.
It must be something else.
All right. What do you guys got?
That was
Jim, I know
Caseyville. That was
oh, there
Caseyville.
you go. Jim, I know
Well,
you got a lot of hot races in DuPage County.
yeah, well, on DuPage, I mean, but I think the big test here is all our township boards are up, township elections, and that's still the 80-20. We have control, Republicans do. So we have a lot of work being done against our incumbents, a lot of involvement from the party, a lot of involvement from county board members, Democratic county board members, a lot of money coming in from outside sources. So we're trying to beat that back, and we got to get out there, and we just got to remind the voters about what's going on at the county board and how things are kind of out of control there, and we don't want to bring it down to the township level. And again, we need people to get out, and again, you also see a lot of school board races in DuPage because I mean, a lot of woke people are out there and policies in there. And I think we'll talk about it later. You see a lot of people leaving public schools and homeschooling and going to private schools. And it's important. So I think I've seen more races for school boards out there than we have in the past because the people are really motivated this time to get out and, take control of their schools back and their children's education back.
Yeah. Yeah, Andrew, I know this is an important issue to you. You've long pushed for people to pay more attention to local elections, and now you wrote a column about that. What would you want people to be paying attention to?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We have a Democrat state central committee person that is running as a township moderate independent party, and so they've slated a bunch of Democrats to run as independents in a Republican area to see if they can maybe get a foothold in that particular township. So I'm kind of curious how that'll play out. We also had the small city of Rockton. We had a very controversial display where they put a drag show and presented it to children and created a lot of hysteria, rightfully so. And there was big protests on both sides. They brought in all the Rockford folks, all the progressive paid activists that they brought in and tried to like strong arm this small town. So for a little library board race, now it's like packed on both sides, and we'll just kind of see if that wedge issue resonates with the voters. I got a sense that it's going to. So on the real local level, those are two interesting races. Then the mayor's race in Freeport, where I live, town is 53% Democrat, 47% Republican. The Democrat that's running's very progressive, no experience, but working hard and see if he can take out an incumbent mayor that has made some tough decisions that I disagreed with relating to her tax policy to see if she can weather that storm. So we'll see.
Interesting. We'll keep an eye on those races. It's going to be a busy Tuesday in a couple
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah, I've got the only thing down here where I'm at. We've got a sales tax referendum on our ballot. You know, you've seen across the state of Illinois, lots of different school districts and lots of different counties have proposed 1% sales taxes for their schools. And some counties it's failed, some counties it's passed. I know Effingham, just north of me, tried to pass it 3 times and it's failed 3 times. And so I'm a precinct committeeman, and in Clay County, our county party came out actually opposed to it, because we think the answer to our problems is never a tax. And so it's pretty interesting to see the schools got teachers out knocking doors and handing out pamphlets. And so we'll see. That's the hottest issue April 1st in our area.
Interesting. One of our competitors is the big driving force behind pushing those 1% sales tax across the state, and we've never gotten involved with one of those. So that's I'll be interested to see how those all play out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Colin, if I could too, we were talking about getting involved. My friend Richard Irvin out in Aurora is seeking re-election, and the Democratic Party of Illinois is actually very active in that race. So again, we got a Republican run against a Democrat, and the state party is very involved. And we know what happened, when the primary was for our last gubernatorial, that they got involved in our politics and really weighed in on that. Instead of Republicans picking it, they tried to sully the field. So again, I don't think we want to see that. We want to have our voters actually vote for the people we want, and not the party and JB's big money, making the decisions for the people of the city of Aurora.
Yeah, that was one of the races.
Is the Democrat in that race Richard Irvin or the other guy?
Well, so let's talk about this, because there's been a lot of talk about the Democratic Party getting actively involved in races around the state, and they are. And the Republican Party isn't as involved or anywhere near as involved. They're doing mailings in Aurora. They're doing digital ads in Aurora. They're going to spend a crap ton of money to try to take out Richard Irvin. I understand there's a lot of hard feelings coming back from that primary. Totally understand that. Here we are, though, in a couple years later, and the two candidates in that race are Richard Irvin and self-avowed uber progressive John Leach, who's backed by the Democrats. And the Democrats are coming in with a lot of money for their progressive candidate. So that's my question to people who watch this, or even to you guys. Like, this isn't the primary for governor's over. This isn't Darren Bailey versus Richard Irvin. This is years later. And we have a far left Democrat being backed by the Democratic Party. I don't see a movement to come in and help the Republican candidate, or at least the candidate more Republican aligned in that race. Again, I get that there's hard feelings, but are we just going to cede this ground to the Democrats, let them keep wiping us out at the local level? It seems pretty stupid to me.
Well, I think what you've seen is maybe a reminder to politicians not to play footsie with the other side, because it doesn't matter. So if Richard Irvin is a moderate Republican, moderate Democrat, independent, that's a difficult position to be in. And so, Mayor Irvin's got to pick a lane, and because he's chosen not to pick a lane, or he's vacillated on that lane over multiple different times, now you're seeing the result of that. And so he's wanting a home after he's poked both parties in the eye and said, well, I didn't like you and I didn't like you, but oh, by the way, are you going to support me but for a worse candidate? That's not a good way to run a political campaign, is to support me because the other person's worse.
Yeah, and you know what? I wouldn't necessarily back him for another office in the future, like, let's say, governor. But right now, it's a binary choice. It's the uber progressive against that moderate, as you said. Does our movement not benefit from having the more moderate candidate elected versus the uber progressive? If a progressive takes over Aurora, we're not getting it back. Is this better for our party or worse? Chris, go ahead.
Look, here's the thing about local races, is that you need to give nonpartisan races like mayor, township supervisor, library board, school board, for up and down the ballot. You have to give them a reason to trust the Republican Party and to want the Republican Party support. I have heard time and time again from local Republican Party people and activists and other sorts of people that like, well, why should I support so and so? You know, they're not coming to us. I'm like, well, the Republican Party in the area hasn't done anything for any candidates because they assign a litmus test that says, well, you voted in the Democratic Party 12 years ago. Well, I don't know about that, guys. That's outside the realm of possibilities here. Listen, this is a binary choice. Your options are Richard Irvin, which you might like Richard Irvin, you might not like Richard Irvin for a million reasons, or it's a Democratic candidate. And if the Republican Party was smart, they'd go to Richard Irvin and say, listen, Richard, this is what we're going to do for you. We're going to do a mailer to Republican households, encouraging them to vote for you. We'll do a text message to low propensity Republicans, encouraging them to come out and vote. And that's what we're going to do for you. And then in turn, let's say Richard Irvin wins. He's going to say, the Republican Party helped me out. I'll come to the Republican Party. They need my help. I'll help them with this. They need a candidate endorsed. They're more willing to do something like that. But if you do nothing for an elected official, or you do nothing for a candidate, and then you come back 2 years from now and say, well, why wasn't Richard Irvin supporting our candidate for governor? You didn't do anything for him. You didn't extend an olive branch and help the guy out. Why would he help out a party or an infrastructure that does nothing to help him? And that's what my thing is about local races, is that while it is a two-way street, and there needs to be, like when you support someone, they should support you back. You can't expect them to support you when you do nothing for them.
No, and Collin, you can back me up on this. I have been, and I've taken a ton of heat for backing you guys in the Freedom Caucus and defending you a lot of times. I've taken a ton of heat for that. So, and I have praised you guys during the last election when you came up and you walked for candidates that weren't part of your caucus. I publicly multiple times gave you praise for that. So I'm not a Freedom Caucus hating person. I just don't want us on this podcast to be somehow intimating that letting the far left progressives and Dick Durbin and J.B. Pritzker's choice for mayor of Aurora, or let's talk Calumet, or let's talk Peoria, where they backed the Democrats, or Calumet City, I mean, and Peoria, where they're backing Democrats in those races. Republicans got to get involved in these local races. This isn't about Richard Irvin. We have no involvement in his race. Competitors running that race. I gain nothing by him winning or losing. I'm making a larger point here that the Republicans have to do a better job getting involved in these local races, because Democrats are doing it. And yeah, we get involved in some races here and there. I know we're playing in races in DuPage and some other places, but we can't let the Democrats pack their bench full of candidates in the off years, and then the on years we struggle to find candidates because we didn't build our bench. We've got to get better at this. And beyond just Aurora, we got to get better at this.
The Richard Irvin, I don't disagree with you, Collin, and I appreciate that. And I agree that local elections matter, whether it's library board or school board or mayor. The Irvin thing is just, look, there are some people that you are never going to get to forget. The state, the biggest mistake in all of that was anybody thinking that he could come in as a very, very loyal Democrat primary voter and suddenly run for governor against Darren Bailey. And he got smoked, and he's a Democrat, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. There are people that are never going to forget that. That's fine. But to the bigger point, no. I mean, I would rather see, look, if it's a far left crazy progressive or somebody that's not, obviously, we go for the guy that's not. So Irvin is a unique.
I mean, look at the city of Chicago. Like, how many times is it, hey, we've got a chance to get a moderate or conservative Democrat in versus a progressive. We're not going to get a Republican. We take the conservative. We take the moderate. So even if you're right, even if Irvin is a Democrat, I don't care. That's not my fight. I don't care. But in that case, even if he is a Democrat, you've got a moderate Democrat against a far left progressive. That's an easy choice for me. Just like when I go to some of these other communities. And I think that's just the point, is we're letting these people stand on their own because they were played, or they ran a bad campaign for governor, or they said some things we didn't like. This is the kind of short-sighted decision making that we have in our party that kicks us in the ass 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years down the road, because Democrats play chess, we play checkers, and it just constantly happens.
But
sorry.
The political rehabilitation is what you're talking about, has to happen at the initiative of Mayor Irvin. And so he has to build the trust within the local party to get them galvanized and get them excited to vote. It doesn't work in reverse. And so the idea is that you have to support me because the alternative is worse is never a winning argument. He has to build those relationships, and it's incumbent on the mayor to have those relationships. And if he doesn't have those relationships, it's on him.
That's a very fair point. Michael, close us out on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, not specific to Aurora, but just in general, that you see across the state that the Democrats are very brazenly getting involved in these April elections. Used to they would kind of do it behind the scenes and you weren't really sure what they were up to. Now you've got Democrat congressmen and congresswomen endorsing candidates for local office and
Doing
doing
events
photo
for him,
shoots
knocking on
with
doors with him.
them
Yep.
and all sorts of things, right? And on our side of the aisle, where, we have some juice in some of these counties, we've got to start, doing things for our Republican candidates that are running. I know it's nonpartisan, but you know who the Republicans are, you know who the Democrats are. Like, get behind them. Let's get them elected because, as you said, they could be our next county board member. They could be our next county clerk. They could be our next county sheriff. I don't know, whatever they're qualified for. Like, you got to build that bench. And we've
Yeah,
been
well,
trying a lot in the Metro East to do more of that, especially this cycle. So we'll see how it pays off for us. But
you
fingers
mentioned county
crossed.
clerks. I mean, certainly in DuPage County, I think we could all agree we need a new county clerk there. One who answers
Amen.
to the
Claire,
county.
too.
Amen.
As we close this out, there's one thing I just want to point out, just for those who watch state politics. I was shocked to see, I didn't know this, Harry Benton, yes, that Harry Benton, State Representative Harry Benton, is running for Wheatland Township Highway Commissioner. Apparently, he wants to be like JBT out there and double and triple up on his taxpayer pensions and taxpayer salaries. That's a $72,000 a year salary plus pension and vehicle that he's running for there in Wheatland Township. I'd imagine Republicans are going to be hot and heavy to try to target that race again. They put a lot of money in that race in 2024 to try to knock him out. This is not necessarily something I've seen poll very well with voters. Somebody double dipping with pensions in a state that has a massive pension crisis. So if Harry Benton, just the fact that he's running for this, I think is going to hurt him in his next election. Should he win, I could definitely see this coming up in his next race. So just something I figured was worth pointing out here as Republicans start looking toward 2026. I think a dumb move by Harry Benton, but what do you expect from these people who like to line their pockets with taxpayer funds like Harry Benton? They're going to show their true colors at some point, and he's showing his true colors here. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Let's talk the Homeschool Act. We talked this in depth last week, but there are developments. Witness slips are flying on this bill, and they're pretty much flying on just one side of it. So the proponents, there are 647 witness slips in favor of this. As of when I checked a couple hours ago, there are 25,706 witness slips in opposition for this HB 2827. This is, as we talked about last week, a super hot button issue. I know Andrew and Collin both wanted to cover this topic, so I know we're covering it 2 weeks in a row, but it's still hot in the news right now. So I'll pass it to you guys, Andrew and Collin, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, it's the only group that comes down to Springfield that doesn't want anything and just wants us to leave them alone. And so they pay for a service they don't use through their property taxes and they don't complain and they just want to be left alone. And so the reason that they're outraged is the one thing they've asked is just to leave them alone and let the parents be front and center in their children's education and quality of life. And what we've seen is this is another attempt for the teacher unions to use the legislature to start flexing their muscle in an area that's growing in popularity, which is homeschooling. And less than half of our children can read and write at grade level. The teachers unions have failed to educate our children properly, and for the small group of those that have chosen to make the sacrifice and homeschool their children because it's a big commitment to do this. I just want to be left alone, and they pay for the service that they never use, and that's why you've seen the opposition to this proposed bill.
Andrew, that's a point I haven't heard made enough. We didn't even say that last week, and I wish that was said more. That I don't necessarily really understand the teachers union opposition here because they're getting the tax dollars either way. I mean, these families are paying those property taxes, so you're getting money for those kids, whether you have to educate them or not. So not having to educate them means you've got more money to spend on everything else you want to spend money on. It's obviously about control. I get why they want this, but at the end of the day, I think it's a solid point to make here. These people are still paying their taxes just like everybody else, but they choose to want to educate their kids themselves, even while also paying those taxes. I think that's a solid point that should be made more often.
Yeah. If the IEA and public schools and the Democrats are scared of anything, they're scared of education competition. We saw that last year when they killed Invest in Kids. I mean, they simply do not like anything that competes with their public school industrial education complex. So, to be more nuanced or to be more descriptive, this bill was supposed to get called in a hearing yesterday. We now believe it's going to get called in committee next Wednesday, the 19th. And so, we're welcoming the homeschoolers to come by the thousands to pack the Capitol. And now the rumor is that Costa Howard has an amendment. And so, Lord knows what her amendment could possibly be. But just to piggyback off the senator, I mean, these parents are asking for their right to educate their children in their home, to be unbothered. I mean, they're not asking for anything egregious. They're not asking for anything new. They simply just want to educate their children in their home. And now the school teacher, the Democrats and the IEA are coming in and saying, well, no, that's not okay. And they're going so far as to literally threaten these people, these parents, with truancy. So, yeah, I mean, we're actively fighting this. I'm really proud of the homeschool kids and the associations. They're fighting hard. And so hopefully we'll see them next week in the Capitol, pack the place.
Well, you're going to see us as we talk this week, and when we get to our bad bill section, we're going to talk about a few bills where I don't think it's accidental that there are some little things just snuck into these bills that are pretty egregious. And that when you talk about there's an amendment coming, that's because Tara Costa Howard was caught. There was a part of this bill that they tried to sneak through that went after private schools as well, and that got caught. And so Tara Costa Howard is having to amend the bill to take that out. I don't think that was accidental. And as we talk about some of the other bills later on in this podcast, there are a number of those provisions that are clearly they're trying to sneak through in bigger bills that thank God people are keeping an eye on what's going on out in Springfield, because those are where a lot of the problems arise in the legislation.
Yeah, and Collin, you had brought up, I think that's a lot of it was that they had the private schools. Once you rile up the private schools, again, like the senator had said, these are people who make the choice to send their kids to private school or to homeschool, and they still pay the property taxes, which is a large amount. And it's a large amount to go to private schools. But again, maybe the bigger question should be asked, why are so many people leaving the public schools and going and homeschooling and sending their kid to private schools? It's because the education system, we see it in DuPage. A lot of people are moving out of Cook County because of the schools, and they're coming in and they're saying, hey, I want my kids to have the best school that they can. And they still vote Democrat. They didn't realize that we actually built the schools and made everything great. And then they come here and they still vote the way they did in the city. But again, you rile up the homeschoolers who are just want to be left alone. And the private schools try to put more burden on private schools who have really tight budgets. I mean, that's what's getting people upset. So again, just an unnecessary bill that's out there. And again, it's riling up a lot of people all over. And you get the Catholic schools involved, the homeschoolers. That's why I think that there's a lot of outrage on that.
Yeah. Well, Jim, to your point, I mean, the people are moving out into the suburbs more often than not, specifically for the schools. And what they don't realize, we've gotten to learn this working with a lot of these schools. There's a lot of these superintendents who are fiscal conservatives, fiscally responsible people. It's a lot of good center-right school board members out, around in the suburbs. Even some of the unions, not all of them, not most of them even, but even some of the local teachers unions are more center-right. Because we learned the more you get from leadership and get down to the actual households, the more even union households lean right versus lean left. And so they're coming out to these more conservative school districts that are successful because of it. And then, of course, as you said, bringing their bad voting history with them. But we definitely could do a better job highlighting, how some of these districts are doing a real good job. Instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, let's highlight how conservative leadership has really succeeded in some of these districts.
Well, and I think you see some of the quotes in these articles about this bill and some of the things that the proponents are saying that are just downright offensive. We've got parents in this state that are trying to hide their children from public view. They're abusive and they're trying to cover it up. That's why they're homeschooling. They're not educating the kids. They're just, putting them in front of a television or a Xbox or something. And it's like, I'm sure there are instances where people are, using this and they have bad intentions. But there's a lot of people that aren't happy and aren't satisfied with the education that's being provided by the state, so they're sending their kid to a private school or they're homeschooling. It's like they're trying to make these homeschooling parents into like a boogeyman. They can't be trusted, and we got to do something about it. And people are riled up, and rightfully so.
Well, that's the mentality of the far left, right? You can't be trusted with your own children. That's problematic, and it's a great message for Republicans if we push back on it right. All right, speaking of Republicans, let's talk about some political stuff because, I mean, let's be real. We're political animals. We got to talk politics. Let's talk two specific races. First, the run for governor. There's a candidate who's been laying the groundwork who's starting to become a little bit more public with it, in Richard Porter running for governor. And then there's another candidate who's officially announced for Illinois Senate. Let's take these one at a time, though, just so we don't confuse people. So let's talk about governor first. Talk about Richard Porter as a potential candidate, whether you like that or not. Obviously, we know Jim Mendrick has already announced he's starting to make the rounds. He actually had a pretty good interview on Thursday of this week out of Springfield with Collin and Andrew's best buddy, Patrick Finkston. Jim Mendrick had a decent interview there in Springfield, did pretty well. I know there's some other candidates laying the groundwork, and I know there's rumors about whether or not Pritzker is going to run for re-election. So a free-for-all in the governor's race. Go for it.
Well, I'm biased to my guy, obviously, Jim Mendrick. I've known Jim a long time. I like Richard Porter, though, too. And I just hope we don't get into this where we got a lot of great candidates running for governor and we forget about the U.S. Senate spot. I mean, that's a problem, too. I mean, last time I thought maybe a few of our candidates could have gone the other way and taken out Duckworth with the money and the resources they had. So I like Richard, but I like Jim a little bit more. But again, it's that season, so it's uncertainty. And it'll be interesting to see what JB does with his money and what he thinks that's the best that he can do with running for president, obviously, that he's going to do. So is it as a sitting governor or as a sitting senator or, what he wants to do at that point. But, it's going to become that time of the season. I hope we don't have what happened, 4 years ago. We can, get around a candidate and, not kill our own during the primary.
It's wishful thinking, I think, Jim, but I appreciate the sentiment.
I don't feel strongly yet because I think it's just early. So I work for a sheriff's office, so obviously the appeal of a sheriff being governor, I love that, and I think that Mendrick's a good guy. Richard Porter hasn't always been ultra friendly to the conservative movement, but I'm happy to admit that he probably has Richard Porter's the kind of guy that has the chops, right, to put a team together, to run a race. Yeah, I mean, he knows the people. But I think that everything's premature right now because who knows who's going to line up for what in the next few weeks.
Well, Collin, your point's pretty solid. I mean, I saw somebody on Facebook who I'm friends with who was like, you know what? I'm not doing what I did last time. I'm just the first guy who announces. Jim's announced. I'm with him. I don't care who else announces. I'm like, okay, well, it's March, y'all. Like, let's take a breath and make sure we know who the field's going to be here. But, I do see a lot of that where in the Republican Party too often, I see a lot of people endorsing the first person to ask them or supporting the first person to ask them. It's like, maybe get an idea what the field's going to be like before you just, jump in bed with the first person to invite you over.
I like how this conversation isn't really like enthusiastic about any of the people that we're kind of talking about, even in the back of our heads. Like, if this was a purple state or a red state, you'd be hearing people speculating running for office and be like, wow, like that person, they'd be like a really good candidate. Like I'm on board with them. Or that guy. Could you imagine if they ran? But like we're Illinois, so it's like, oh yeah, Mendrick announced he's a decent guy. Porter, he could put a team together, I guess. But now we're just kind of like reserving ourselves to the fact that we're gonna have a bunch of we're gonna have the B squad going up for governor in 2026. And that's sad. If you're the Republican Party in the state of Illinois, that we're like none of these people we're talking about really just like galvanizes the party. We're like, woo, we're gonna win 2026, guys. Come on, man.
Yeah,
I don't even know if that person. I'm sorry, Collin.
No, I was just going to say that's the challenge here. I mean, we've got right now a bunch of tier 3 candidates that we're looking at, hoping they become tier 2 candidates, but none of them certainly that we've seen so far have the possibility to be that tier 1 super exciting candidate. I mean, Jim, I know you're here, so forgive me. You don't have to respond to this, but Mendrick is a nice guy, he's a likable guy, but the campaign so far has been it's there's not a campaign there. I know it's early, but he was on that show. He said, "Oh, we're going to announce our lieutenant governor tomorrow," which tomorrow is Friday. Like anyone in politics knows, you don't make a major announcement on a Friday. Like it's just like if we don't even have candidates who know that sort of basic thing, that you don't roll your light gov out on a Friday in March. It's just a dumb play. It's just that's kind of the frustration here is even those candidates who Jim Mendrick has potential, but we're going to need if you're going to take on JB Pritzker, because at this point it looks like he's likely to run again. If you're going to take on Pritzker, you got to have a much better game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's so my plea to anybody, and we've talked about this before and at length, hopefully at some point, about ballot chasing, whether it be in specific House districts or Senate districts. But I just think that no matter who it is, if we don't have a strong ground game to capture ballots that just simply aren't getting cast that are out there for us, if we don't have somebody who's willing to run that kind of an operation, I think to Chris's point, that's why everyone's just kind of like, okay, because without a serious operation to put more votes in the bank, it's just kind of like, okay, well, there's our nominee, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Colin, because like nobody knows how to run a field program anymore, especially a statewide gubernatorial field program. That's like unheard of in the state of Illinois in the last few years. So we think we definitely need to consider that whenever we're choosing a nominee. But again, it's also money. You know, last week on the podcast, I talked about people running for U.S. Senate who have no idea how to raise $1 million. Same concept for governor. How are these people going to find the money to be a viable candidate for governor in the state of Illinois? That's a question you need to ask whatever candidate you're going to be backing, especially if you're a donor. If you're a donor and someone's asking you for money and you're going to be the biggest check that they get the entire cycle, consider that. Think about that.
Right. Let's talk about the Senate race. We'll switch over there. So a gentleman by the name of John Goodman has announced, if you don't know who John Goodman is, you're not alone. Most people don't. He's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, so thank you, sir, for your service. Beyond that, not a lot of political experience or involvement. Seems to be building an email list. He sent out a couple emails. Someone must be behind that because they're very their professional emails always asking for money, which is how like every politician sends their emails. So there's definitely somebody here involved with the race. I'm sure we'll learn soon. But what's interesting about this race, I just got to say, this is one of those this just happened today. You put out an email today, which is Thursday as we record, that I was speechless. So let me just share what was speechless to me, and I'll just see what you guys have as a reaction to this. So one of the main things he's using in his race is that he lost his son, which means his son died, which I've been trying to dig on because that's the intimation he's made multiple times. Turns out in the story, he talked about how his son was questioning his identity and struggling with mental health, and he turned to professionals for help. I'm reading the email. Instead of getting the care he needed and wanted, he was pushed into making a life-changing decision. It intimates that he changed his gender. They lured him to a homeless shelter, and just like that, my son was gone. Again, intimating he died. I'm digging in this. It seems like he didn't actually die, but I don't know that actually for certain. But it seems like that's the big crux for him running, that his son changed his identity, changed his gender, and that's what's driving him to run here. But here's why I'm bringing this up. Because right after talking about how these people are going through these sex change treatments, he gives the line, the only dick I want to get rid of is Dick Durbin. So in the context of talking about sex changes and getting rid of your genitalia, he uses the line, the only dick I want to get rid of is Dick Durbin. It's without the context, it's a line that you're like, okay, that's attacking Dick Durbin. With the context, it's like, oh crap, did you really just say that? And I don't know what to say.
Wild statement.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave it to you guys because I'm speechless with that line. Like, it certainly gets attention, but you're talking about your kid here. Like, I don't know. It's not a line I think I personally would be willing to cross, but it's certainly going to get some attention.
I just want to congratulate Dick Durbin or whoever it is on another victory for 2 more or 4 more years for their Senate seat. I mean, seriously, again, I feel the same way about this as we just discussed. This guy's a nice guy and all that, but people roll out of bed and think I'm going to run for U.S. Senate, or I'm going to run for governor, or I'm going to run for whatever. And it's like, that's just simply not how that's not even how it works in Wyoming, where there's 500,000 people. Like, it's just simply not reality.
And it's a deep red state where somebody with this type of ideology could get elected pretty easily if they won the primary.
Right.
You know, again, it's the same concept from the last discussion. Nobody who we're talking about for U.S. Senate's really like setting off any alarms. Like, oh, this guy, he's got it. Like, it's not like, I mean, the only person who like fits that description is like Darren LaHood. And Darren, if you're watching this, I don't think you're running for U.S. Senate, even though I think the people on this podcast and the people watching might like that. I don't think it's a good idea for you to do it, and I don't think you're going to do it. And you're the only candidate anybody would get excited about. So that's the truth of the thing.
It goes back to building the bench, right? We got some work to do. If there's 1 or 2 or 3 total names in a state this large that we can get excited about, we got work to do to build the bench.
Well, I think obviously, he's taking an approach of like first out of the gate, like kind of be controversial or, try to grab headlines, get attention and see what sticks. But I mean, I'm sure there's going to be other candidates that get in this race and, you've still got to raise money. I mean, even in a Republican primary to get your message out and make sure people actually know who you are, because a lot of these names that we've heard So far, John Goodman has already announced, there's this Dr. Dave Nyack that I guess is considering it based on the actions that he's taken, but their name ID has got to be, 1%. Like, if that, like, nobody knows who they are. So it's going to be interesting
Yeah,
to watch.
when your name ID is the margin of error or less, you have problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Collin, I think you brought up the big point there that we talked about earlier, is that it's the bench thing. It's about bringing people up. I mean, as a county chair, I get calls from people like, "Hi, I'm John Smith. I'm running for Congress." I'm like, "Well, who are you?" I mean, that's what it's too much. It's happening is that we need to, get that. We don't have a bench. We don't have anything else. So this is what happens. You have people that from all over the place think it's easy to run for office, that I just go out and get some signatures and we throw some signs up that are horrible that nobody can read, and that I'm going to be a player and then I can be in the political, speak for the next 8 months. And it doesn't work. I mean, you have to get out there. You have to have some financial, you got to, like you said, you have to learn how to raise money. I mean, you have to get out there. You have to start somewhere. You have to start on a school board or a library board or a fire board and work your way up to a municipality, then to a county spot, then to be a state rep or a state senator. I mean, we just don't do that anymore. It's like I had too many people that put their name on a ballot, they're running for county board, and we never see them again. And we get, we lose, the races, corresponding races by a couple hundred votes, which if that person running for county board would have done anything, would have helped the Forest Preserve Commissioner in that area, and they would have won. So it's a trickle down effect. And again, we're going to see people. I mean, I thought John Goodman, I got that email. I mean, yeah, shocking to say that, but probably not the best thing when you're not known is to put something out like that. I think that's pretty crazy at that point.
Yeah. And I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just too pessimistic here, but I'm kind of the opinion that without somebody that really, really just lights this on fire and has the financial capacity to do it and wants an organized ground game, I don't know that I have, like, all of my energy right now is like, hey, let's find these House and Senate seats in Springfield that we can win. Because we know that there's 3 or 4 out there between the 2 chambers that we can actually put energy behind, like not waste our time, not waste $5 million to get our butts kicked statewide or whatever. So, until someone comes along with that kind of an operation, I'm excited about trying to flip 2 or 3 seats in the House. So, unless Senator Chesney runs for Congress.
We need the governor's mansion in 2030. We need to be out of the super minority by 2030. Like, that's got to be our goal here, because it's about the next remap. We need to think, over the next 4 to 6 years, versus just what's right in front of our faces, which, we're not super great at. All right, let me move. Oh, Senator, were you looking to jump in, or are you good? You just unmuted yourself. Okay, you're good. So let me jump to our next topic here. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. And what I mean is I'm actually trying to pull together like a full episode just on this, because Republicans have been really struggling with what to say and how to deal with the cuts that are coming out of D.C. and cuts, I should put air quotes on some of these, that are coming out of D.C. and Medicaid. And we have been struggling on this a bit. So I'm going to pull together a full episode on it, but I can't wait anymore. I keep pushing it back week after week. We're going to at least talk about it a little bit. Let me lay the groundwork here. The media, Democrats, they've been breathless anytime there's a hint about any sort of cuts to the federal budget. I went on Crane's one time, it was a week or 2 ago, and literally every headline was about this. What Illinois faces if congressional Republicans slash Medicaid. Impending expiration of tax credits could leave more Illinoisans uninsured. Medical care a top concern for Cook County residents. Proposed Medicaid reforms are a prescription that will intensify pain. Preventative care in childhood reduces the burden in adulthood. Republicans threaten Medicaid cuts would cause disease, death, and destruction. I mean, these are all the freaking headlines coming out of it, and that's just one newspaper outlet. It's just over and over. We've seen all week this week people freaking out about the Department of Education. I'll give them credit. The one person out there who's been a little bit moderate in their response has been Rich Miller, where he's been saying, we don't know what the impact is going to be. But that's kind of the thing here is Pritzker's coming out screaming. The state departments are coming out screaming. Of course, all their special interests are coming out screaming. And the reality is we just don't know what kind of an impact this is going to have. But of course, any cuts are talked about, everybody just freaks out and says that, every school district is going to lose all their money and every college is going to close. And it's like, this is the Democrats' reaction. Let me give you a couple examples and then I'll open this up to conversation. First, a puff of the cigar. All right, so here's an example. So they're talking about two different programs out of the ag department that were being cut. And all the newspaper articles were, more than $1 billion in federal spending. And then they dug and people asked questions. And then it was like, well, no, it's more like hundreds of millions, not $1 billion. Then they dug further. And it turns out for the state of Illinois, what we're talking about here is $27 million. That all this hysteria over these massive cuts that we're going to put every family farmer out of business. And when you drill down, it's actually $27 million that we're talking about. And what is that $27 million going towards? It's going exclusively and only to socially disadvantaged farmers and producers. That means Blacks, American Indians, Asians, Hawaiians, Hispanics. That's it. Only to those groups. Pritzker tried to spin it as this is going to hurt every family farmer. This is going to hurt all the farms throughout the state of Illinois. But actually, his own Department of Agriculture director came into Springfield this week and had to admit the intent of the program is only to target socially disadvantaged farmers. So no, Pritzker was lying. Another thing here, they're talking about the cuts in the EPA and how this is just going to decimate the EPA. They dig a little further, and what does the Sun-Times actually have to report? That it's literally 20 to 30 of the roughly 1,000 employees for the EPA in this region. That's what they're freaking out about, is 20 to 30 out of 1,000. Let's keep going. There was a huge breathless article in the Chicago Tribune about how these cuts to Medicaid are going to put everybody out on the street with no health care. And they got quotes from people, from seniors and people with special needs and single mothers. And it was just story after story in the article about how this is going to hurt all of them. And yet, what has been proven is that the cuts are not actually targeting any of those individuals. As a matter of fact, not a single person in that article would lose their health care or have any cuts as a result of what's being talked about in DC. So yet again, breathless to the point of being completely out of reality. A couple more examples, then I'll pass it on to everybody to give their thoughts. What's the next one here? Hold on, got to scroll. All right, next one here. Well, I think that was it. I must have actually cut. There was a couple others that I accidentally cut, but I've been talking too long. So let me pass it to you guys. These cuts that we're talking about out of DC, they're breathless examples, but then when you actually drill down, you're talking about a handful of jobs here and some cuts over there, which actually aren't cuts. These cuts to Medicaid, people got to realize it's still growth. It's reducing the growth, but it's not even holding it steady. It's just slowing the growth slightly. That's literally the Medicaid cuts we're talking about, is still increasing the spending, but just by a little bit less than we were before. That's being called a cut to Medicaid. It's just the spin is ridiculous, and people are starting to buy it, which is a problem. What do you guys think?
My view is that the Republicans don't go on offense, and they may be going on offense on the federal level, but why are these programs or why is the approval becoming more and more popular? I would pose the question to this group: show me where the Republicans went on offense to defend it or to push back against that narrative. Largely, we just take on the water and then quietly say, that's not true, that's not true, and we move on. Well, over time, that builds into a narrative that untruth becomes the truth of the reality and becomes the reality for these folks. And so, I keep pressing anybody that will listen. The Republicans have to get an offensive game in this state, and we continue to stand by, waiting not to get hit or taking on water. And then once we get hit, we're like, oh, that hurt. Well, why don't we just go on offense? And when you go on offense, at times you may make a mistake or two, but doing nothing is essentially just giving up. And that's why you've seen that narrative be manipulated by the Democrat majority. So I pose this to the group. So you take a look at the leadership of this state. How many of them have gone and done the circles defending the president's positions? My guess would be about zero.
I mean, I will say one thing I've liked to see, because you're right, we need to go on offense. One thing I've liked to see out of both the Senate and Republican caucuses this year has been more going on offense. Certainly there's more we can do. And you're right, we need to go on offense more. I would just say again, with me trying to be more positive in 2025, it's nice to see we actually do have a backbone this year because it's been a while since I've seen one from Republicans in the state. So, not discrediting your point, simply saying I'm happy to see we are finally starting to go on offense. But this is why I want to do a whole episode on this topic because, to your point, we are super defensive or, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Every time there's an article, there's no quote from a Republican. We reached out to so and so, but they didn't return our call. Like, we got to get on this playing field because right now Democrats are owning this playing field and they're making it seem like these are massive, massive cuts to working families in order to fund a tax cut for the wealthy. That's what the Democrats are spinning this as. And because we're not even on the damn playing field, that's what voters are going to believe. Because in the absence of an alternative story, they're going to believe whatever's put in front of them. And right now, we have not put any sort of alternative story in front of them.
But just to be clear, that backbone was created in the state of Illinois because of the swing states delivering Donald Trump to the presidency. Much of that backbone that was created were the same anti-Trumpers that didn't want him to win or didn't think he was going to win in November. So that backbone was created because of people in Arizona and people in Nevada, not because the establishment believed it in Illinois. So when we are trying to make a blue state purple, we need to take the Trump populism and we need to project that in this state because if we're going to try to win, it worked in Nevada, it worked in Pennsylvania, it worked in Michigan, but in the state of Illinois, we say those same policies for some reason just won't work. And in my view, that's not true. So when we say that the Republicans finally got the backbone, that backbone was delivered by other states, not because the establishment here believed it.
Well, let's be honest with ourselves here. Being that type of Trumpian populist in the state of Illinois would mean to be pro-union, and that's something that a lot of Republicans in the state just won't do. But in any case, in relation to government cuts in D.C., the problem is that Trump made this as easy as possible for the Democratic Party by putting the richest person in the world in charge of the cuts, which basically is like a marketing bonanza for the Democratic Party. Because the Republican Party became like Reddit in 2015, where they were obsessed with Elon Musk and his technological advancements, when he was just a charlatan taking money out of the federal government to stuff in his own pocket. That's how he got rich. But the Republican Party, for whatever reason, views this Elon Musk guy as like the second coming. So they're going to put him in front of every camera they can. They're not going to stop him from going in every camera he wants to be in front of. And every time Elon Musk says something stupid, it's going to be on the next Democratic fundraising email. So I think that if you put some empty suit bureaucrat in there in charge of cutting federal spending, it would be a lot harder for the Democratic Party to use it as a messaging issue in politics. But instead, we put Elon Musk in charge, and now the Democrats are having been
Chris, I wouldn't even put a bureaucrat out there. I'd put somebody up there who actually relies on these programs and have them say, I want to be able to rely on this program long into the future. Thank God they're making these adjustments to the program so that those of us who actually need the money are still going to be able to get the money long term. Like, that's the message we're missing here. I mentioned earlier, these aren't actually cuts. This is just slowing the growth of the spending. But here's what people got to realize. Let me give you a couple talking points. We'll get into this more later on, but let me give you guys a couple talking points we got to start using. Number one, what Republicans are asking for is work requirements for able-bodied adults. We're simply asking that those who who are on these programs, that they work, train, or volunteer part-time. Because here's the deal. 62% of able-bodied adults who are on Medicaid don't work at all. They could, but they don't. That's all we're trying to do is move them from welfare to work so that the money's available for those who can't work or train or even volunteer. Another thing here, we're trying to cut the waste and the fraud in the program. And multiple studies have shown that more than $1 in $5 spent on Medicaid is spent improperly. That's over $1 trillion that's being wasted. We want to cut down on that fraud and abuse so the money goes to those who actually need it and they can rely on these programs long term. And who actually needs it? Illinois. The state of Illinois right now has 17,000 people with developmental disabilities who are on a waiting list for Medicaid services. We want to get the money to them because they're waiting for services. But instead, Pritzker and the Democrats are prioritizing those 760,000 able-bodied, childless adults who could get a job, and we can't give help to the 17,000 who need it. And as a matter of fact, over 1,000 people with disabilities have died waiting for Illinois to do something to help them through Medicaid. That's what we need to be talking about. So instead of putting out the bureaucrats out there, let's talk about the fact That the point here is to make sure that that single mother has the help that she needs, that that senior has the help that they need, that that person with developmental disabilities has the help that they need. And somebody who's on this program who could be working, get off your ass and go work so we can help the people who really, really need it. Because Republicans want to help. We care. That's why we're doing this. That's the way this needs to be presented.
Well, I think one thing that's just super ironic is, you've got the Trump administration and they're, going through line by line and determining, okay, where are some cost savings? Where can we make adjustments to these programs? And you have the Cranes and the Sun-Times and all these journalists in Illinois, and their hair's on fire. And this, can you believe this? The cuts that they're making, and people are going to be out on the streets. Well, then at the same time, JB Pritzker is talking about, hey, we probably need to make some cuts to the budget because we're, what 1.7 billion or 3 billion or whatever the number actually is out of balance. And is there a single article criticizing him for that? So it's
He's
okay
just being fiscally responsible, Michael.
It's okay for JB Pritzker, one of the richest people in the state of Illinois, to make cuts to state programs, but it's not okay for Elon Musk and Donald Trump to make cuts to federal programs. It's like, it's to be expected. But I think, like we were saying, that's why it has to be, we have to be on defense and offense at the same time. And it's just got to happen.
In 2025, we're going to be more positive. So let's talk about something real positive. I don't think, unless you have that Elon Musk dynamic, we passed a continuing resolution and could only lose one Republican. That never happens unless you have a Donald Trump and an Elon Musk and a believable message where conservatives believe for the first time in a long time that there's going to be a genuine interest of cutting the federal budget. And so I understand the chainsaw and all the theatrics is a little nut much. These are real people that lives are being impacted. But you just saw for the first time, let's talk positive, all the Trump appointments have passed. Continuing resolution have passed. You are seeing a united Republican Party for the first time in a long time, and that's something to celebrate in 2025.
Fair point.
We were united on all but one appointment, but
what's that?
We were united on all but one cabinet appointment, but we're not going to talk about that.
We'll move on from that. We're staying positive. Collin, you were trying to jump in before.
Well, I just was going to say I'm pretty proud of the Freedom Caucus members on the House and Senate floor, because when you talk about being on the offense and not letting this stuff go unanswered, the Democrats every day of session are just getting up and bloviating about Trump and education and Medicaid and blah, 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 blah. And I'll be honest, there's 118 people in that chamber, 40 are Republicans in the House side. And the same 3 or 4 people that are getting up and responding, 75% of them are the Freedom Caucus, because, we're not going to let this crap go unanswered. And, Steve Reich jumps in occasionally and some other people. But, the reality is that this stuff has to go answered, and we have to be on the offense. And just today on the House floor, Will Davis, a Democrat from the South suburbs, and Blaine were into it on the House floor over education, equity versus excellence. And Will and him went back and forth. And the reality is, Will, your kids can't read. What has the Department of Education done for you people in the last 40 years? You guys have been in charge as Democrats. You've had this since Jimmy Carter, and our freaking kids can't read. So, it's been a really good message, I think, from Blaine, Will Hauer, and others on the House floor.
Colin, I apologize for taking a photo while you were talking, but my little boy's in the window right in front of me staring at me while I'm trying to focus on doing this podcast, and he's just too dang cute, so it's distracting.
I get it.
Let me give you just a couple numbers. Again, we're going to dive into this more in future episodes, but just because we keep struggling on this, there's a few things I want to put out there that Republicans need to start chewing on. Pritzker keeps putting out just how horrible these cuts are going to be and how many Illinoisans it's going to impact. And my response has been, it's that many? Like that's actually in and of itself a concern. So Pritzker's numbers are that 3.4 million Illinoisans are covered by Medicaid. That's 1/4 of our state's population. Like that actually in and of itself should be a conversation, that 1 out of 4 of our residents is on Medicaid. When you look at the fact that only 1.47 million in the state are on poverty, why is the number that high? That should be a conversation, which is not what he wants to talk about. Talk about 1.4 million children are covered by Medicaid. That's half the kids in this state. Again, that's a really, really high percentage that makes me wonder, like, what's going on that half of our kids are at an income level where they need Medicaid. Like, the numbers don't add up to me. There's other numbers too that we could dive into, and we will in future podcasts, but these numbers are significantly high, and it's a reason why Republicans in DC are saying, hey, you know what, let's mean test this and make sure that everybody's on the program needs to be on the program, because walking down the street, I don't think 1 in 4 would qualify for Medicaid if you actually checked their income and checked what they had available in the bank account. There's definitely some fraud and abuse here.
Well, Collin, I mean, I think you brought up a good point. You've given the best explanations. What is our state party doing besides sending out that our chair is going to be at every Lincoln Day dinner and be the headliner all over the state? Why aren't we getting this information out to our local elected officials, our Republican Party, to get out there? I mean, you've had the best explanation. I mean, I'm getting ready to endorse you for Senate at this point because you had an explanation.
Please, no.
But again, what's our state party doing that there should be some messaging on this so we can get up there and go to bat on this, on topics that maybe our local officials don't know about. And like you said, I mean, these numbers just don't jibe. And again, it's just the messaging and getting the information out to our people, so then they can combat, what they see on TV and on social media and everything every day. And again, that should be one of their roles. But again, I don't know what the state party does at this point.
Well, I appreciate Jim, Collin, Andrew, and of course our team for doing this week. It's a time commitment to do this, but the whole point of this podcast is that getting these details, getting this information, equipping Republicans throughout the state. If somebody else was doing it, I would be happy not to do this. I'm going to pay for everything out of my own pocket. I take the time away. I'm staring at my beautiful boy. I'd rather play with him for an hour and a half than talk to you schlubs. So I hope someone else steps up and does this, but until they do, we're 95 episodes in, it's still not being done. We take heat from all sides because everyone thinks we have ulterior motives. We don't. It's literally that. It's if Republicans are going to win the state, we got to get better, and we're going to do our part by making things known. So thank you guys for taking the time to join us this week so we can help do that. Speaking of which, let's go to our segment that we do every episode at this point, where we talk about the news you can use. For our viewers who are around the state, our listeners, every week we equip you with some bad bills or some facts or some details you need to know that you could use in your fundraising appeals, on your social media, in your press releases, on the House floor, Senate floor, whatever it might be. We're equipping Republicans throughout the state with things you need to be aware of. We go through this pretty quickly. I talk fast, so it doesn't usually take too long. But let me give you guys some things you should be aware of. And then, as always, I'll pause at the end if any of our 5 panelists this week have any quick thoughts on that specific topic. First one I want to talk about is this. House Bill 3458. This is some Chicago Democrats, Davis, Cassidy, and Evans, who want to amend the criminal code essentially to make it legal to attack police officers. As long as you say that you were in the middle of a mental health episode, suddenly now you cannot be held responsible for attacking police officers. I'd imagine some of you have some pretty strong opinions on that bill, so I'll shut up and just let you carry why that's such a bad bill.
Well, I'm happy to jump in here. Somebody who works in law enforcement, I can tell you that these people have obviously never been in these kinds of situations. I would love to see Kelly Cassidy and these people make a bill that say, hey, if I get attacked, if a legislator gets attacked and the defense is mental health, it's okay. They would never do that. Yep. But, I put on my badge and my firearm and suddenly, I can get abused and it's fine. Or the guys I work with, the deputies and officers that I work with. And all we're doing is destroying the morale of law enforcement. Nobody wants to be a cop in Illinois because our people get out of jail for free. We can get punched and kicked, and it's fine, apparently. So it's just destroying the morale of law enforcement.
Well, to your point, it's a solid point, which is under Illinois right now, you get charged with aggravated battery if you attack a peace officer, a community policing volunteer, a fireman, a private security officer, a correctional employee, a DHS employee. I'm sure there's other sections of the law that cover elected officials, as you said. This proposal is just about police officers. That's it. You can say you've got a mental health episode and attack a police officer, but all the rest of these are still protect. So it is specifically targeting police officers, and it's intentional. All right, let me go to the next one. Go ahead quickly.
I think what you see there is we had said, when you bring bills out like this, I'm sure another 100 law enforcement just decided to turn in their badge and retire because they've gotten to that thing. And that's the scary part, because this state continues, the Democrats continue to be anti-law enforcement. And, I have a son that's turning 21 on Saturday, and he wants to get into law enforcement. He says, I think you're going to be mad at me. And I said, no, I think it's a great line to get into. And obviously, we need good people because the state is scaring a lot of good people away from law enforcement. And every time they do one of these bills, I know I'm going to go on Facebook and see, 15 more people in the next 2 months at the sheriff's office retiring, and we're already 45, 50 people, sheriffs down in DuPage. And I know the municipalities are struggling too. And that just is going to continue to keep this just exodus of our good law enforcement people here in the state of Illinois.
Yeah. All right, let me go to the next one here. Senate Bill 2254. This one, I mean, usually I can find some reason why people are doing a bill. Like there might be some sliver of it that makes sense. I can't find any sense in this bill. It's Kimberly Lightford, Adrian Johnson, and Mary Edley Allen, who are pushing this bill, which amends, again, the criminal code. Right now, if you are a child sex offender, you can't live within 500 feet of a school building. This would change that to 250 feet. So literally the entire point of this bill is you can now live closer to a school if you're a child sex offender, not a sex offender. We're literally talking about child sex offenders, and this bill lets you live closer to a school. There's a few other provisions in the bill that don't make sense either, but that's the one that's the most egregious. And I can't find a single justification for this bill. It's talking about far left progressives. The Democratic Party in this state is on the side of criminals, including child sex offenders. That's who they're proudly standing behind instead of standing behind the victims of crimes in Illinois.
Yeah, well, I mean, what Governor Pritzker did during COVID is he let them all out of jails and prisons in the name of health, life, and safety, and so they need a place to live. And but all the problem that we see is that the Democrats are not going to stop until they can create pure chaos everywhere throughout their state. And so they do this intentionally. And that's why if you take a look at areas that have been dominated by Democrat policies, there's generally chaos and there's apathy and there's frustration. And most of the constituencies don't know how to punch their way out of these problems. And so the soft on crime that we see and that we continue to see that narrative in Springfield, this is just a continuation of it. And it never stops at 250 feet or 500 feet. It goes to 100 feet. Then before you know it, there's no standard at all. And so, and you can see how they feel about these people because they put these offenders, these sick people into our communities, and now they want to give them more accommodations than certainly they deserve.
All right. Solid point. I can let that stand and move to the next one. Let's go to the next one here. So Senate Bill 1938. We're sticking to the Senate here. This is Ram Villavelam and Christopher Belt, 1938. So if you don't know in Illinois, you pay pretty high tolls. I'm pretty sure you know that, especially if you live in the Chicagoland area. You may not know this. You actually pay double gas taxes in Illinois. You pay the gas tax, and then you pay a sales tax on top of the gas tax. This bill would now add a mileage tax. And here's the kicker. What they admit is that this wouldn't be enough. They say it's to replace the gas tax. That's what they say it's for. And they make a semi-solid point that those who don't have to use gas aren't paying to be on our highways or to be on the roads because they're not paying the gas tax. That by itself is a decent little nugget that maybe we can talk about. But then it gets to the bottom and they admit, yeah, we're actually not going to eliminate the gas tax. This is on top of the gas tax. So you'll pay tolls, you'll pay gas taxes twice, and now they want to add a mileage tax on top of that. So yet again, Democrats in the state who want to raise your cost of living by making it harder to travel. This is, and also, by the way, likely part of their funding their funding plan for the reform of Chicagoland transit, but we can talk about that a different time. Here it's again just raising your cost of living.
Well, I was going to say that bills like that are extremely unpopular, especially in Southern Illinois, like where Collin and I are, Moseley, because we drive a long ways to get anywhere. When I was in high school, I had to drive 24 miles round trip to go from my house to my high school. That mileage adds up quick. So that's one thing. Chris Belt sponsoring this. What an idiot, because people in the Metro East and in Southern Illinois that live in his district are not supportive of something like this. But then on the flip side, it's like, I could understand if maybe they did a mileage tax for people with electric vehicles. I mean, obviously the Secretary of State's office knows.
This is our quick hits section, Michael. Go faster.
Yeah, I'm just saying they could do a mileage tax on electric vehicles, and I would be fine with that because they're not paying gas tax. But why are you going to charge us gas tax and mileage tax for those of us that,
Right.
have gas or diesel?
I got a quick hit here real quick. Since this podcast is geared towards, Republican officials, my message is if this does get called, do not make the same mistake you made 4 years ago and cut a deal as a Republican to vote for this, okay? Because this is a horrible bill. It's a horrible idea, but so was the gas tax. And we had people line up because they were going to get cash in their district to vote for this. So if this bill gets called, it's horrible. It's a tax increase. You're a Republican. Don't freaking vote for it.
Bad news for Collin Moseley. The only people who watch this podcast are Democratic elected officials. In any case, if this bill actually does,
which is, just to be clear, is absolutely not true. But just go ahead.
In any case, if this bill actually passes, I might have to quit my job because Collin makes me drive an hour there and an hour back to our office every time I have to be there. So I ain't paying more mileage on my car for my driving. So Collin, you're gonna have to move the office down here. You're losing Chris basically, or you'll never see me at the office. Which
it sounds like a win-win to me. But that's all right.
Chris.
All right, let me keep moving us along here. So there's another bill here. Obviously, we've talked about this. The funding fiscal cliff for our transit agencies. There's a bill in the House and the Senate that's specifically targeting one of the potential plans to address that crisis. That's not the point of this topic. The point of this topic is this: hidden deep in that bill, which I only found because a coalition of people who support it put out a press release. Hidden deep in that bill is a provision that would require that the Illinois EPA adopts rules that align with the vehicle emission standards in California. Here's how crazy this is. It's literally written in this section that not only would we have to align our EPA, our vehicle emission standards to California, but if California changes their laws, we automatically change ours too. We're basically outsourcing our EPA, our standards to the state of California. Whatever they do, we do. What does that include? It means a zero emission vehicle program. It means a low emission vehicle program for another specific set of cars. It means the clean trucks program, heavy duty low oxides. I don't know what that program is, but if you dig deep in this, it essentially means no gas cars, no gas trucks. They're outlawing them in the state of Illinois. It's very deep and a very, very, very long bill that supposedly is focused on other things. But of course, they toss this little thing in there for the environmentalists in the state. So essentially, you see all these Democrats who have lined up behind this bill, including some that are in districts that they may not be as safe as they think, like Joyce Mason and others are lining up to sponsor this bill. And it would outlaw gas cars and trucks in Illinois. And I got to imagine that wouldn't play well with working families throughout this state.
No, I mean, come on. I'm tired of hearing this fiscal cliff. I mean, about mass transit. Maybe because it's been poorly run and the CTA is horrible and everything the city of Chicago does is a nightmare. I mean, you come out to DuPage and look at a Pace bus, and I can tell you the most people you're going to see is maybe two. I mean, at this point, we could buy everybody a car and just get rid of mass transportation, keep Metro, keep the trains running. But the buses, I mean, this is another crazy attempt to, follow another woke state. Because we don't have the wherewithal to make our own bills. We're going to follow the worst states in the country.
It's an attack on family farmers, too. We saw this bill last year, and Farm Bureau is opposed to it because 90% of the family farms in Illinois run with 2003, 2004 pickups, and it would literally put them out of business. All their vehicles would be useless.
That's a good point.
I think we're going to have a big reduction in those that are participating in college because we learned the CTA linemen are earning about $350,000 a year. So I assume everybody's dropping out of college and applying to the CTA because it's one of the most lucrative jobs in the state.
You mentioned that, and so did Jim. So I'm going to go out of order. Our producer, Lane Davis, is going to hate me, but I might as well just talk about that because that is in this section. So let's move it up. Let's talk about that. So the CTA was caught giving out massive salaries while crying poor and saying they're facing a fiscal cliff. Here's the thing I dug, and I found in Reddit, somebody posted something on Reddit about how you should get a job in the CTA because not only will they hire you, they will ramp up your overtime so you get paid a significant amount of money. It's literally in Reddit. Like, this is from CTA, their own graphic, how they're showing you how much you can make once they put you on overtime and get you way more money. This is not an accident. This is absolutely intentional by the CTA. It was found, kudos to Rep. Moylan, who's calling this out. Even though he's a Democrat, I'll give kudos where it's due. 8 different CTA workers are made more than 300 grand last year. 160 of them made more than 200 grand. This is not an accident. So while they go down to Springfield and say that we're poor, we're running out of money, on the flip side of it, they are purposely hiring people and then dumping them into overtime and ramping up how much money they're making. It's not an accident, and yet they want tax dollars to bail them out from their fiscal problems. All right, let me go back in order, so give me a second to scroll back up. The next bill I want to point out, we've got just a few more. This one you got to dig a little bit, but it's worth it. Senate Bill 2157 and House Bill 3197. Rachel Ventura on the Senate side. I don't think I noted who was on the House side. Yeah, I didn't, so that's my mistake. But either way, those are the bills. Oh, Dan Dedich, Croak, Gazardi, Rashid, and Nabila Saeed, who may be in a targeted race next time, is on the House side. Guzman is also on the Senate side. If you look at this bill, it's supposedly supposed to be about making sure that we don't contribute to deforestation and being careful about that. Of course, in her press release, Rachel Ventura claims that this is going to save billions and billions of dollars. This is going to help our economic development. This is huge. This is super, positive. I think she's used like the number 40 billion somewhere. I'm struggling to find it right now in my notes. But what would this actually do? What this would actually do is it would restrict the government's ability to get into a contract with anyone who whether they need tropical timber, which is ebony, mahogany, rosewood, teak, satinwood, unless you can prove that it didn't come from a region that had any sort of deforestation. But it gets worse. It also says that any state agency that contracts with anyone in a forest risk commodity would have to prove they weren't part of growing or deriving or harvesting or rearing any forest degradation. What are those things that are considered forest risk commodities? Beef, soy, palm oil, cocoa, coffee, timber, the list goes on and on. Essentially, anything the state of Illinois contracts, anything they contract, they're going to have to prove that it didn't in any way go near a region that had any sort of deforestation. I don't know how you prove this, but it's significant cost increases for contractors and for the state in order to reach this unfunded mandate. It's yet another situation where far left progressives in Illinois raise our costs. People like Nabila Saeed say over and over, I'm lowering your cost of living, and yet she backs these far left progressive bills that directly raise costs for government and the cost of living in this state. So I know I had to dig deep and explain that, which means it doesn't make for a good press release, but it deserves some eyeballs because it's yet another situation of these far left progressives just going way beyond what they need to do, even to support environmentally friendly policies. All right, I lost everybody with that one, which I expected, but I still had to put it out there. Last bills I want to talk about here are Senate Bills 1696 and House Bill 3138. This is a bill where it's been identified that the state is moving towards they're calling it an insurance cliff with foster care providers. I'm not going to go into the details because just like the last issue, I'll lose you. But here's the key point here. There was a solution that was proposed, but because the Illinois trial lawyers didn't like that solution, they completely killed the bill. They killed the whole idea. And what I want to know is those vulnerable Democrats on the Senate, one of the sponsors is vulnerable, Doris Turner. In the House, Suzanne Ness is vulnerable. And both of them were sponsors of this bill that would have supported our foster kids in Illinois. And they allowed that bill to be killed by the trial lawyers who are huge donors to the Democrats. And I want to know, Doris Turner on the Senate, Suzanne Ness in the House, do you agree with the trial lawyers putting profits in ahead of the foster kids in this state? I want to know that.
As they said in Jerry Maguire, show me the money, and these Democrats want to see the money. That's what they want to see. They couldn't care less. They will put people out of business as long as they get their coffers filled. And that's what you see. They're
the party that cares about foster kids until the trial lawyers come and say, no, 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 we won't donate to you if you do that. And suddenly they no longer care about foster kids. It's so
That's right.
That's exactly right.
All right, last thing in this section. Illinois families, congratulations. You are number one. You now pay the highest combined state and local taxes in the nation. I believe we were second for a bit. We are now highest for the overall burden that you pay in this state. Lane and Post is going to bring up a graphic that shows the whole country. We're higher than New York. We're higher than California. We're higher than any of these other blue states. And oh, by the way, Lane will show a second graphic. We are higher than every other state in the Midwest significantly. A move to Missouri would save you over $5,000 in your state and local tax rates that you pay. Move to Iowa would save you almost $3,000. That's how bad it is in Illinois. You pay the highest combined state and local taxes in the entire country. Collin, I know you noted this in your notes earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's all true, and yet the Democrats seem to just totally want to ignore that we are the highest, one of the highest tax states, the highest tax state in the country. I mean, there's nothing to see here. These people are taxation deniers. I mean, we are 51st if you include Washington D.C. for overall combined tax rate. We're the second highest property taxes. We are highest on gas taxes, second highest gas taxes. I mean, every metric except for one, we were like the worst on. The only thing Illinois has going for it is we don't have any like the personal property taxes or whatever. But, hey, nothing's safe in Illinois. So, I mean, it's just, again, every time we talk about the issue of taxes, the Democrats just want to pretend like these numbers don't exist. Like we don't pay outrageously high property taxes, like our sales tax, like our income tax. But the proof is in the pudding. I mean, that study's from Wallet Hub. Okay, this isn't some far right-wing propaganda. Wallet Hub itself says, yeah, Illinois is the worst.
The only downside to the numbers that Collin and Collin both brought up in regards to savings in other states is you'd have to live in Missouri. You'd have to live in Iowa. God forbid.
Well,
Andrew,
I think again that shows why we're having so much economic problems in Illinois, and that's why we're struggling with all the rest of the Midwestern states. And when you talk about a lot of these reps and senators, a lot of their constituents don't pay taxes. I mean, it doesn't bother them. They can continue to raise them because you talked about those people that are on these programs like Medicaid and all the other stuff. That's what most of their constituents are on. And it's the working people that are burdening this, but that's not their constituents, so they don't really care about it.
Well, that's the key.
And our money's their money anyways. That's how they feel.
But Jim, that's the key. I mean, somehow we need to start fighting back on that specifically because we let Pritzker and the Democrats say working families, and yet every policy they push are for poor families. And I have no problem supporting poor families. I do it a lot in my private life. It's important to me. But we let Pritzker say this is all to support working families. But in reality, they're not actually helping working families. All the policies they put in place make things more expensive for working families in order to support lower income individuals. That's what doesn't get talked about enough. Whenever they say, look, we're helping working families because we raise the minimum wage. Well, the word minimum is in there. You're not helping the middle class, but yet we somehow, that's always their talking point. We're helping working families because we raise the minimum wage. Over and over, we let them get away with this. And yet the reality is, over and over, they're making it harder for the working families of the state to get by. And it's all to help a very small subset, which Mark Batnick has been in this program a lot. The more we do to help that subset, we have been proven to be the worst in the country when it comes to helping the poor people of this state. So clearly those policies aren't actually helping the people they're supposed to be helping.
Yeah, and that's why Moody's tells us that the future for Illinois is not bright because our tax base is going to continue shrinking.
All right, let's get to our final segment because we are over time. Thank you, everybody, for giving us of your time. This final segment, we have some fun. It's our OG Clown of the Week nomination. You can put anybody in there that you'd like, that you want to give some praise to or scorn, ideally in politics, ideally in Illinois, but it's anarchy. There are no rules. So what do you guys got for this week that you want to call out?
Well, I got to say on Clown of the Week, it was just came to everybody's attention today that there was a professor at SIU Carbondale who was filming porn all over campus and posting it on social media. Terrible. Kyle Miller, hopefully he goes to jail because he deserves it. So that's a big clown.
Yep. 100% agree.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
What made me chuckle this week was Chicago City Council taking up everything they have going on in the city of Chicago, trying to ban fur and fur sales. I just thought that was,
and then failing.
where are we going on this? I just like, what? They got a million different issues going on, and they're going to spend hours on fur trade and businesses. So just
Hey, maybe the PETA vote will get Johnson up to like 7% instead of 6.5%.
To be fair, I've been seeing a lot of people talk about the fur thing.
Chris, this is not a back and forth. This is clowns and OGs, man.
I'll always remember that, Collin. Every time you go back and forth with something I have to say.
Yeah, I make the rules.
Remember
that's just
hey, we're getting lively here. That's what the viewers want.
Yeah. What else you guys got for OGs and clowns?
I always screw this up. Do you want it at the same time?
Whatever you want, man. There's no rules.
My clown
Other than when I want to piss Chris off.
My clown of the week is unequivocally Kelly Cassidy, because this week on the floor, she melted down multiple times and last week about how important it is that we stop paying attention to kids transgendering, right? She melted down about how we need to leave the kids alone and just let them cut their genitals off at 12. And then she went so far as to tell Bill Howder, a doctor, that his science was wrong and her science was right. So she's my clown of the week. My OG of the week is every member of Congress that continues to recognize that Mr. McBride is a man. That congressman is not a woman. He is a man.
I'll abide by my own rules and just leave that one alone. Go ahead, Chris.
My clowns of the week are all of the election authorities, county clerk's offices, which have given nothing but strife over the past several weeks in relation to several different items. I don't know how it is for you downstaters with your county clerk's offices, but when this cycle started, vote by mail ballots were supposed to be mailed February 20th, unless you lived in a jurisdiction that had a primary election on February 25th. Well, in many jurisdictions over the course of several weeks, I have been given answers from clerk's offices and election authorities of, we don't know when the ballots are going to be mailed. Call back later. It was supposed to be February 20th. And some counties like DuPage County, they're getting mailed on Monday, the start of early voting, which doesn't make any sense to me when ballots were originally supposed to be able to be mailed in February 20th and we're shrinking the period. This is voter disenfranchisement. And then you have some of these counties that will not give you election data that you're able to get because it's public information because, oh, you're not the official chairman of a political action committee or a candidate committee. Well, I'm working for the campaign, buddy. What am I going to do? Just not give it to the campaign and pocket the data? Yeah, because I really want to call all these vote by mail requesters in McHenry County. So for non-political purposes, that's what I'm doing in my free time, guys. Yeah. So if you're basically like a broad stroke, if you're an election authority not doing your job, you are the clown of the week. Thank you.
And like Champaign County screwing up their ballots. So yet again, another election that the Champaign County clerk, Ammons, can't handle. But I digress. What else you guys got?
Clown of the week, Democrat Party. They're about as popular as an IRS audit. If we want to be positive in 2025, if there's any party that's less popular, it's the Democrat Party. They can't define the difference between a man and a woman. They have no message. When you're asked who their leader is, they all look at somebody else and they have no leader. So we have a leader, we have a plan, and we're moving forward as Republicans.
All right. Anybody else have anything they want to toss in? I'll get mine in here quickly if you don't. All right, let me do a couple OGs here. So I want to give OGs in the Senate side. I've been trying to highlight good legislation that Republicans put forward, or Democrats in some cases. I want to give kudos to Sue Rezin and Sally Turner. They're putting forward a bill to expand criminalization of fentanyl. I am sick and tired of those people who are like, oh, you hear this a lot. Only 43 pounds of fentanyl came in from Canada, but it takes 2 grams to kill somebody. That means 43 pounds could kill almost 10 million people. So you know what? When you want to say only 43 pounds, maybe we actually should do something about something that's a gigantic crisis, especially throughout the Chicagoland area. So kudos to Turner and Rezin for pushing forward that bill. Again, I keep doing this, but kudos to Jed Davis. Yet again, he's pushed forward some bills that I think are really solid. Focused on reducing cost of living, 1650, 1937, 3668. It's got some good bills he's pushing forward, but even somebody who, I'll say this, who is not a fan of the Freedom Caucus, texted me and said respect for Jed Davis and what he's doing to push forward some of these bills. So you guys there's some respect coming your way, even from people who don't like you. So I'll give you that credit, and kudos to Jed Davis. Finally, to a Democrat, Steve Stottleman, putting forward Senate Bill 1884 to eliminate the requirement that you actually have to have a bachelor's degree in order to get a job with the state of Illinois. As somebody who didn't have a chance to go get a college education, I am increasingly frustrated by that line in people's job postings that you must have a bachelor's degree in order to even get a job. For those of us who have real world experience, I think that tends to speak a lot more to than sitting in a room and getting a D on a class. So kudos on good legislation, even from a Democrat. Let's talk about clowns of the week. There's two big ones. I got to talk about those idiots who were yet again outside of Mike Ferricks's home at 3 a.m, screaming at him, purposely trying to wake up his kids, wake up his family. That was BS. I called it out last time it happened. I'm going to call it out again. I don't care that Ferricks is a Democrat. We should have at least some standards in our politics. And screaming and purposely trying to wake up his young children because you don't like his policies in the state of Israel and you don't like that he's invested in some Israeli bonds is absolutely way across the line, and I call that out unequivocally. Same thing has happened in Orland Park. My wife has a rant that I don't have time to read, so maybe Lane, I can send it to you and you can just bring it up on screen. But Keith Peacock is the incumbent mayor, and yet some people in his opponent's camp have put out a robocall attacking his wife Betty, calling her, I kid you not, blowjob Betty, and attacking her at her place of work, and just absolutely going after her personally, going after their kids and their family. This is not the first time they've done it, but if that's how low you stoop in order to gain power, you do not deserve power. So unequivocal clown of the week to that group. Couple others quickly that I will give. Let's see here. I can skip that one. That's a national one. Nobody really cares here about that. Let's talk about Ann Stavra Murray. This was behind the paywall at Cat Facts, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but apparently she was caught on Reddit by somebody just speeding up I-55, cutting people off, honking her horn because she thought that her state of Illinois plates gave her immunity and let her drive just however she wants. This is what we tend to see out of far left progressive Democrats in Illinois. They can do whatever they want. They just don't want you to break the laws. And Ann Stavra Murray gets a clown of the week for that. Just two more here real quick. Let's talk about Democrat Mayor of Niles, who I'm never going to say this name right, Alpaganianis. That was awful, but whatever. The mayor of the state of the city of Niles was trying to remove his small handgun from his restaurant and dropped it, and it went off. And he shot himself and a coworker. And I don't know. I got nothing for this other than that's clown worthy. Come on. That's clown worthy. You don't deserve to have a gun if you can't be a law abiding citizen who knows how to actually handle your firearms. Last one here is let's go to the Metro East. $7 million school meal fraud case, where who's this individual? Hold on, let's see here. Williams and Warford were the individuals. I don't have their first names. They stole $7 million from the school district to buy themselves a home in Edwardsville, a Lincoln Navigator, a Ram pickup, a Mercedes-Benz, a Chrysler, 2 vans, vacations, furniture, home electronics, and landscaping, all stolen from a school district. So stolen from kids. That is clown worthy, and I'm calling that out every chance I get to see it because that kind of corruption is rampant in the state of Illinois. All right, I'm done. Let's go to our final thoughts. As always, our panelists get to give their final thoughts on any topic they wish. Let's start with our core team members. We'll let our guests go last here. Chris, since you're unmuted and Michael's muted, you get to go first, Chris. Go ahead. Your final thoughts.
So next week is the start of early voting, or at least expanded early voting in all over the state of Illinois. It's also the start of ballot chase because apparently ballots don't get mailed on time anymore in this state. So if you're a field director out there, if you're planning stuff, start planning your election day next week. So hopefully your early voting and ballot chase program is already planned for the last 2 weeks of GOTV. Hit your doors in the last 2 weeks. And if you don't do anything stupid, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Michael?
I was just going to say I agree with something that Senator Chesney said very early on about the importance of playing defense and offense. If you have the opportunity to go, you can go on defense when you're actually in charge and doing things. And, this last election, they put us in charge of the federal government. So as Republicans, we have to be able to defend what the Trump administration is doing and then also go on offense against these crazy Democrats in this state, because just like the bills that we read off show, they're out of there's
no doubt about that. All right, to our three guests, thank you so much for being with us. Collin, I'll go to you first for your final thoughts.
Good to be here as always. And as has been already said, make sure you pay attention to the April 1st elections. And hey, April 2nd starts the 2026 midterm. So let's make sure we get good candidates. Let's make sure we chase down ballots and pick winnable places to focus our resources on.
I like it. Jim and Andrew both brought the heat, but since Andrew's a state policymaker, we'll let him go last. Jim, your final thoughts for the week.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to correct you. I got a solid C for my bachelor's degree, not a D, but that's near the point. But again, it's great being with you. Good conversations, but it's to my Republican friends out there. Speak your piece. Don't sit back and not say anything. That's what's getting us into trouble. Get out there. I do it all the time at the county board and take a lot of heat from my Democratic colleagues, and that's okay because I can take it. And we need to do that and be more vocal out there. And like I said, be on the offensive and stand up for what you believe in. That's what we need to do. And maybe that's part of what got us into trouble because, people don't want to speak up, but it's time to do it and, be out there and, don't be sad for your views.
I like that. Yeah. Don't be ashamed of what you believe. Speak up for what you believe in. I like that. Senator, final word of the day, your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, Collin, appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you allowing the Freedom Caucus to have the ability to get our message out as well. We just want to make sure that how we vote in Springfield is how we first campaigned, and those two match. Oftentimes we see how somebody first campaigns doesn't match how they vote in Springfield, so we're obviously down there to hold people accountable. My final thought would also be to Chris, don't know you well, but I feel like you played the contrarian, the Finkston today, so I always appreciate that robust debate. Felt like you dipped your toes in there. You really wanted to engage, and Collin, you maintained some nice decorum here today through that podcast, but really appreciate you all having me on.
Yeah, sometimes we have the time. This week's agenda was just so packed. We couldn't necessarily have a little extra fun with it. But in the future, we'll let some of that stuff go, especially when we get through legislating down in Springfield. We don't have to spend 15 minutes talking about bad bills. We tend to have a lot more debate. So we're going to have some fun this summer, that's for sure. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching, for listening. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer, who produces all these episodes and lines up our guests and does all the hard work behind the scenes. As I mentioned, we are nearing the end of Springfield's legislating session. And so as we get closer and closer to May, you're going to hear a lot of crazy stuff coming out of Springfield. So get through April 1st, but don't put your feet up. We are not done just because we get through April 1st. So get your favorite center-right candidates elected on April 1st. Pay attention to the fights going on in Springfield all the way through May. And then guess what? We're in the 2026 elections after that. So you don't get a break. Suck it up. Let's keep fighting out there for what we believe in. We will catch you next week on the Smoke-Filled Room. Here's hoping I get a cigar that week too. See y'all later.